Okay, welcome back to you guys. Welcome back from lunch. We're going to start our afternoon with some meditation. I'm going to do the chanting and the breathing mindfulness meditation, then the quiet time where we're just meditating, and then we'll come out with the chanting. And then afterwards, that's where I'm going to help you to understand the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then we're going to talk about the 10 fetters as well. So this goes together really nicely, and we should finish up right around 3 o'clock this afternoon. So if you'd like to join for the meditation, you're more than welcome to chant as we ease into the meditation, and then I'll provide you that guidance, and then you'll be on your own to meditate from that point, and then we'll come out with the chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusranang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusranang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, I'm going to share this topic with you guys of understanding and experiencing the 4 stages of enlightenment. This is how you're going to get to the complete end of discontentedness. That's the ultimate goal, is to completely eliminate all your discontent feelings, where you no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. You can eliminate all these feelings. And the way you might think about the 4 stages of enlightenment is like a personal growth plan. Right? You're going to see how the Buddha lays this out, that there's a certain growth plan here. And he's giving you the trajectory of how to actually get to that point where your mind's completely eliminated all the discontent feelings. So just like always, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions as we go through our class this afternoon. And then after we talk about this, I'm going to share with you guys the 10 fetters as well. So we'll probably take a little break and then I'll share with you the 10 fetters, because that's what's actually going to help you to move through the 4 stages of enlightenment. By the time you get to the jhanas, you're going to start focusing on the 10 fetters more and more closely. But it's helpful to just have awareness of these 10 fetters, even at this early stage in your development, because the Eightfold Path is helping you to eliminate those 10 fetters too. So it's not until you get to the jhanas that you're pivoting to start focusing on them more directly, but you're actually working on eliminating them even just now when you guys just meditated. That's helping you eliminate part of the 10 fetters. Okay, so I'll explain those to you when we get to it. But first, this 4 stages of enlightenment. What are the 4 stages of enlightenment? Like I mentioned, it's a personal growth plan. It's helping you to plot a course towards the elimination of the 10 fetters, which is going to ultimately eliminate 100% of your discontentedness. You're going to need to eliminate the 10 fetters 100%. It explains to you the development of the mind and what to focus on as you're moving closer and closer to enlightenment. Because some of these fetters, you need to eliminate one before you eliminate the other. It doesn't mean that you can't work on the others, but you just aren't going to be able to eliminate maybe the 8th fetter until you eliminate the 1st fetter. So it's helping you to be able to see kind of a general sequence in which to eliminate your 10 fetters. That's what the Four Stages of Enlightenment are doing for you. As a practitioner is eliminating the 10 fetters, their mind is moving closer and closer to enlightenment, experiencing higher and higher degrees of focus, concentration, clarity, and deeper memory. You'll notice that this is happening, and you're going to notice this gradual decreasing of discontentedness. So for example, when you're in the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to see that your discontentedness is a mere fraction of what it once was when you were off the path to enlightenment, that it's reduced that significantly. There's still discontentedness in the mind, but it will have been reduced significantly. It'll be just a mere fraction of what it once was. Once the mind is in the first stage of enlightenment, sorry, this plant is in my way. It will not regress. This is true, that it won't regress backwards. It's impossible for your mind to regress backwards. And you'll see why, because you'll have eliminated doubt, which is one of the fetters, and it'll be impossible for your mind to regress backwards out of that. You'll understand why when you see what the first stage of enlightenment is. Okay, what the first stage of enlightenment is, or what the four stages of enlightenment are not, is just like the jhanas. It's not something to boast about or claim that you've attained, right? This isn't one that you're also going to not call home to mom and be like, Mom, guess what? You're going to be so proud of me. I'm in the first stage of enlightenment. Wow, right? You're not going to put this on your Instagram page or your Facebook page. You're not going to put it on there, right? This is something for you. The only person that you probably will even talk to about the four stages of enlightenment in terms of where you think you might be is with your teacher, because you're going to need to talk with this person to be able to plot your course and say, hey, I think I'm in the first stage of enlightenment, right? Or I think I'm in the second stage. You might need to talk with your teacher about this. But anybody else, even fellow students, you wouldn't even talk to anybody else about this. It's just been for you. That's what these four stages of enlightenment are. The four stages of enlightenment are not only something experienced by ordained practitioners. You'll hear some people that will tell you that it's only ordained practitioners that can get to enlightenment. This isn't true. Some people say household practitioners can only get to the first stage of enlightenment or the second stage of enlightenment, or even some people say the third stage. It's the only thing that you can do. The household practitioners can't get to enlightenment. This is not true whatsoever. I'm here to share that with you, that that's not true. All individuals who are practicing the path can actually get to enlightenment. There's nothing about wearing an orange robe and shaving your hair and living at a temple that is going to change your ability to be able to get to enlightenment or not. You can actually get to enlightenment from a household life. You just need the wisdom to understand how to do it, and that's it. There's nothing different about that individual's mind living at the temple and your mind. It functions exactly the same way. The lifestyle is different. It's a different lifestyle, but in terms of you being able to get to enlightenment, you can get to enlightenment from a household life as well. It's also not something to crave or desire or become obsessed with. Sometimes when people hear about the four stages of enlightenment, they get really obsessed about them. They even chase it. And if you are doing that, you're not going to be able to experience it. So it's not something to become obsessed with. You need to really stay focused on the 10 fetters, because otherwise, if you get bogged down into any one particular stage of enlightenment, then you're not making progress for the next part of the path. So this is what the four stages of enlightenment are not. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be purifying the mind of the 10 fetters. That's how you're going to move through the four stages of enlightenment. And I'm going to teach you these in detail after this. But here I'm just going to kind of show it to you is what the 10 fetters are. Is these are the lower fetters, and this is what you're going to be working to understand and eliminate. Then there's the higher fetters, which are going to be working to understand these and eliminate these. And you're going to learn about these here in a moment. I introduced this to students in some of the other classes, but here I'm just going to show it to you, and then I'm going to teach it to you a little bit later. As you're eliminating the 10 fetters, you're going to be moving through these four stages of enlightenment. The Buddha referred to them as stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. And he referred to them this way because it helps you to understand a bit about them. Just like a log enters the stream, it's going to eventually get to the ocean. It's just a matter of time. The same thing is true for someone who gets to the first stage of enlightenment, that they've entered the stream. They're going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time, either in this life or some future life. There's a maximum of 7 rebirths for somebody who gets to the first stage of enlightenment. They will get to enlightenment. That's why the Buddha calls it a stream enterer, because you've entered the stream, and just like that log is going to eventually get to the ocean, you're going to eventually get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. And your mind won't regress backwards once you're in that first stage of enlightenment. Having gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you will no longer be reborn into the lower realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits, because you will have become a better and better human being by the time you've gotten to this first stage of enlightenment. The second stage of enlightenment, referred to as a once returner, it's referred to in this way because if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn back into the human world, and you will get to enlightenment in that life. Right? Some of you guys might have been once returners in your last life. You don't necessarily know that, right? Maybe this is your opportunity to get to enlightenment in this life. So a once returner is in that second stage of enlightenment, and if they die, they will come back into the human world and get to enlightenment in that next life. A non-returner is the third stage of enlightenment. If an individual dies in this stage of enlightenment, they will be reborn into the heavenly world, and they will attain enlightenment there in that existence. But that's not the ultimate goal. That's not what the Buddha is teaching you to do. He's helping you to be able to get to this fourth stage of enlightenment, referred to during his lifetime as an arahant. This is someone who's completely purified their mind of all 10 fetters. We would refer to this person as an enlightened being. So while this is the way that they often refer to them in various communities, you might think of these as the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment, understanding that the fourth stage is where your mind is actually enlightened, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would refer to it this way: stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. And there's still some people today that refer to it this way. You might even hear some people using the Pali word for this. So the first stage in Pali, they call it sotapanna. You might hear people refer to it that way. I don't teach the Pali words because you don't need to know the Pali words, but knowing this English and what they are is helpful. So we're going to go into this in more detail, and then I'm going to help you to understand what a Buddha is, because a Buddha is not a stage of enlightenment. Sometimes people will tell you everybody is a Buddha. This isn't actually true. The Buddha never taught that. Okay, so we'll explain to you what a Buddha is. It's not a stage of enlightenment. Okay, so as you're making your way through first developing the Eightfold Path, that's what you start on first. When you first get started on the path to enlightenment, you're going to start experiencing the jhanas. And now when you're in the jhanas and you're starting to experience those, you start pivoting and you start focusing on the first, second, and third fetter. And as you start to do that, once you eliminate the first, second, and third fetters, now your mind's going to be in the first stage of enlightenment. There's some other things you need to do too in order to train your mind to get to this first stage of enlightenment, but these are the three main criteria: that you've eliminated personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. Again, you're going to learn about these here in a moment. If you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back to the human realm because you've become a better and better human being. You're no longer going to be reborn in the lower realm, but you will be reborn a maximum of 7 times. Doesn't mean you have to be reborn that many times, but there won't be an 8th existence for someone who's gotten into the stream entry or this first stage of enlightenment. So this stage of enlightenment is really helpful, really important for those reasons, but also because your discontentedness is significantly reduced by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. You're still becoming discontent, but it's not as much as it once was. The second stage of enlightenment, referred to as a once returner, you've already eliminated the first 3 fetters, but you've thinned out number 4 and 5, sensual desire and ill will. What it means to thin something out is that it's not as strong as it once was. So I'll give you an example of this. Like one of the strongest sensual desires that you have typically, not all people, but some people, they have a strong craving for sex. If you're noticing that you're not as interested in sex anymore, it's just like, yeah, I can take it or leave it kind of thing. This is a thinning of sensual desire. It doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment if you're experiencing that, but that's just an example for you. That maybe at one time in your life when you were maybe in your teens or your early 20s, you had a really strong desire for sex. By the time you get to the second stage of enlightenment, you'll see that that's thinning, as well as other sensual desires as well. Same thing as when you were in your teens, maybe you had a lot more anger, a lot more hatred and ill will, very fierce, and now you're noticing that's thinning out. Right? Again, it doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment if that's occurring, but that's an example of someone who's thinning out their ill will, that it's not going to be as strong as it once was. So someone who's in the second stage of enlightenment would have already eliminated the first 3 fetters, and these 2 would be thinned out. And if they die here, they're going to come back to the human realm one more time, and they will get to enlightenment in that existence. And this individual is having even less discontentedness than someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment. The once returner is having even less discontentedness than the stream enter. They're still becoming discontent, but it's less than the first stage. Then there's the third stage. This is called a non-returner. This individual has eliminated the 5 lower fetters. They're becoming discontent about once every 2 or 3 months, maybe even once every 6 months. It's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it occurs. It might last for about all of 30 seconds. In fact, the people around them probably don't even know that they're discontent because it's all internal. It's all within one's own mind. So in this stage of enlightenment, it's very infrequent and very insignificant when you're experiencing discontentedness. And you'll know exactly when you're experiencing it, and you'll be able to cut it off and let it go. Again, insignificant and infrequent that this is occurring. And you really need to stay diligent here and stay on top of your practice, because the mind can be a little bit complacent potentially in this stage of enlightenment because it's very insignificant and infrequent that you're experiencing discontentedness. If you die in this stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn into the heavenly realm, and you're going to attain enlightenment in that existence. That's not the goal, though, because you would like to get to enlightenment in this life so you can enjoy the rest of this life in this enlightened mental state. Because waiting until your death and then being reborn in the heavenly realm, this isn't ideal. You would like to do all that work as soon as possible and get rid of all these fetters. And that's what an arahant or an enlightened being has done. They've eliminated all the 10 fetters, not just the lower fetters, but the higher fetters as well. This individual is not experiencing any discontentedness whatsoever. It'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, no anger, no frustration, not even the slightest ickiness in the mind. The mind is bright and cheerful and uplifted. Life is effortless. You're not tired and exhausted. Your mind is bright and cheerful and uplifted. You have energy all day long. You have sustainable energy all day long. You're not bouncing off the walls like you might think in the unenlightened state, but you have sustainable energy all day long. You don't get tired and exhausted. You're not dragging your feet. So if you get to the end of your day and you feel exhausted, this is because you've been outside chasing your cravings. Your mind's chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing. And if you get home and it was a good day, wow, it was a good day. I feel so great. Everything was wonderful. That's because you got all your cravings fulfilled. All your cravings were getting fulfilled. But if you get home and it's like, oh, this was a horrible day. This was a terrible day. That's because your cravings weren't getting fulfilled. And now you feel exhausted. By the time you get to enlightenment, in the fourth stage of enlightenment, you don't have that cravings, desires, attachments. You're just pursuing your goals and objectives through wise decision making. Every day is a good day. Every single day. It's a good day because everything's happening and you're enjoying every single aspect of your life. There's nothing that's going to create a bad day for you because you're not out there chasing things. You're out there making wise decisions about how to navigate the world and accomplish the things that you'd like to accomplish. So your mind's no longer polluted. You're not dragging your feet. You're not exhausted. You're not tired, but you do get sleepy. You're going to need to have some sleep, right? You're going to need to take a nap perhaps, or you're going to need to sleep at night. You'll feel sleepy, but you just won't be exhausted and dragging your feet, right? So you're going to have that cheerfulness in the mind, that brightness, that gladness. You'll have focus, concentration, clarity. You'll have deep memory. You'll notice all your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, that there's not bitterness and harshness and hostility in your relationships any longer because you've purified your mind and you just don't do that any longer. You don't have that. So this is what they used to refer to as an arahant, and this is what we would refer to as an enlightened being. When you die in this stage of enlightenment, we actually don't call it death. We call it the breakup of the body, and we call it final enlightenment. Because as long as you're in this existence, there's one thing that you can't eliminate. Your body and your mind is still going to be together. You can eliminate all your other attachments, but you can't eliminate the body and the mind being together. This is why you still experience some physical pain, even when you're enlightened, because the body and the mind are still together. So you're going to experience some muted physical pain. In the unenlightened state, if you stump your toe, you'll feel the physical pain, but then you're going to get mental anguish too. You're going to be angry and frustrated about that. The Buddha talks about this like getting hit with two darts. You get hit with the physical dart and you get hit with the mental dart, right? When you're enlightened, you'll get hit with the physical dart, but you don't get the mental one. It's just the physical pain. You might even start laughing when you stump your toe as an enlightened being. So you're still going to experience some muted physical pain. But when this being dies at the end of this life, now you've experienced final enlightenment, where the mind and the body separate, and now there's no more physical pain either from that point forward, right? Because the mind and the body is now separated. That's what we call final enlightenment, or some people call it final nibbana. So that's what an enlightened being is experiencing. And at the time of the end of this life in final enlightenment, the Buddha doesn't say what comes next. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. He specifically calls it out. He says, remember, monks, what did I teach? I taught this. And he explains what did he teach. And then he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he lists out 10 things that he didn't teach. And one of those things that he didn't teach is what happens for an enlightened being after they die. He wisely left this as an undeclared teaching, because by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind needs to be so peaceful and so joyful that you're content and peaceful in the present moment. It's not about an afterlife. That's not what the Buddha's teachings are about. It's not about believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. It's about getting to a wonderful, ideal life now in this existence. So let's just say there is something next. And the Buddha didn't say there is or there isn't, but let's just say there is something next. And the Buddha describes what this is. Well, that's just one more thing for you to crave. Now you're craving and longing and yearning to get to that thing, right? And you can't ever get to enlightenment to get to that thing because you're still craving it. You're not content in the present moment. Your mind's still longing and yearning for what's next. So by not telling you whether there is or isn't something next, it focuses you on what you need to focus on, which is in the present moment, getting to peace and joy now in the present moment. And if there is something next after enlightenment, it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. And if there isn't something next, so be it. Oh, well, right? You're already peaceful. You're already joyful, right? You don't care what's next. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're peaceful and joyful in the present moment. So the Buddha doesn't say what comes next for an enlightened being. One of the reasons why he might have done this is the one that I just shared. Another reason that he might have not shared this is because a Buddha typically only teaches things that they've experienced for themselves. They need to experience it through their own direct experience to know that it's true, and then they know that that particular thing is true. So the Buddha had never been enlightened and died before. Nobody has ever lived in the world that has been enlightened, died, and come back, because you don't get to enlightenment, die, and come back. If you get to enlightenment, you're outside of the cycle of rebirth. You're no longer going to be reborn back into the world. So the Buddha had never gotten to enlightenment, died, and being able to experience what may or may not be next. So that's a second reason why the Buddha might not have declared what's next. But there are situations where a Buddha actually can know about something that's going to happen before experiencing it themselves. They do have that ability. So if the Buddha did know what was next, he wisely left it undeclared. If there is even anything next, he wisely left it as undeclared, because otherwise you would be stuck in this infinite loop where you would be craving for this thing that's next, but you can only get to it if you eliminate craving. Do you understand? There's this thing that's next. Let's just say there is something next. It's really wonderful, and you start craving it. But you can only get to it if you eliminate your craving for it. So by not telling you what is or isn't next, then it allows you to not have that craving. And now you can actually focus on getting to enlightenment, and then you'll see for yourself, is there something next after enlightenment? So this fourth stage of enlightenment, your mind is completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment. You're not longing, yearning for what may or may not come next. So do you guys have any questions up to this point? Anything you'd like to ask? Yes, sir. Yeah, there's people online that are joining us.
Then you just mentioned that Buddha like intentionally not sharing what happened like after like Arahant like death, right,
Mm-hmm.
or gone. Because like the craving, to avoid the craving. But like all those teaching, or including the concept of enlightenment, is also let us craving like to the state. Well, then why?
But you need to know what enlightenment is in order to be able to attain it. You wouldn't be able to attain enlightenment without knowing what it is. But you can attain enlightenment without knowing what's coming next. It is possible for you to do that. But you wouldn't be able to attain enlightenment without knowing what it is, because you need to know what the goal is to be able to work towards it.
Got it. Okay.
You understand? Yeah. Okay. We have a question coming in on YouTube. So it looks like Linda is asking, hello, Teacher David. Thank you for teaching to us. I wonder, if I need several lifetimes to achieve enlightenment, did I already know about Buddha and practice his teachings in another life? So every single one of us that are in existence today, we've had countless lives in the past. You may or may not remember that right now, but as you start training your mind and you lift out this pollution, you may actually start having memories of your past lives. But for sure, you've had countless lives in the past. This human life, whether you've actually learned and practiced the Buddhist teachings in a previous life or not, that's not something I could tell you. That's something that you would need to be able to see yourself as part of observing your past lives. Whether you did or didn't, it doesn't really matter. At this point, whatever is going on in your mind, you need to be able to purify your mind now. But if you did practice his teachings in a previous life, that would only be beneficial for you, because now it's going to be easier for you to recall those. So sometimes when people get on this path and they start learning, it just makes complete sense to them. It's very clear. It's very straightforward. In fact, they may even be quite young when they found the path. These are people that are potentially have learned the teachings in the past. But then there's sometimes people, when they learn the teachings of the Buddha, it's very difficult for them to understand. It's very cumbersome. And they might have even found the teachings very late in this life. These people most likely did not learn and practice the teachings in a previous life. So if somebody did or didn't practice the teachings in a previous life, so be it. Whatever happened, happened. The goal is in the present moment, be learning and growing and developing, but it does help you having learned in a previous life. So in the same respect, learning and practicing these teachings now in this life, if for some reason you don't get to enlightenment and you die in that next life, it's going to be much better for that next being that you've learned and practiced in this life. Okay, let me see if we have anything on Facebook. Okay, I don't see anything on Facebook. Okay, so now, how to attain the 4 stages of enlightenment. Well, you start off with a well-developed practice of the Eightfold Path. That's where every student should start out. You need to learn each individual section, the wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. You need to know that inside and out. And students will oftentimes work with that for the first few years of developing their practice. Surely the first several months, but even the first few years, you're still dialing that Eightfold Path in closer and closer. And even when you're in the first and second stage of enlightenment, you're not turning your back on the Eightfold Path. You're still practicing it, but you're really putting a lot of effort up front at the beginning of your journey to enlightenment to learn and understand and practice the Eightfold Path. That's where you've got to start, is understanding that inside and out, backwards and forwards. Then, once you're experiencing the jhanas, you start working on the elimination of all the 10 fetters. The Eightfold Path is already helping you to do that, but now you're going to start to pivot and you're going to start focusing more closely on the 10 fetters. And that's why I'm going to teach that next. Then you're going to need a deep understanding of dependent origination, the natural law of karma, the 5 aggregates, in the 6 sense bases. These are teachings that I teach in the Pali Canon and English study group. I also teach it as part of the retreat that I teach each January and each August. There's 2 retreats that I teach, where the retreat in January is everything you need to get to the first stage of enlightenment, and the retreat in August is everything you need to do to get to enlightenment, training the mind in the teachings. So these are higher level teachings than what it is that you've necessarily been learning up to this point but these are teachings that you're going to need in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. You're going to need to understand and practice dependent origination, the natural law of karma, the 5 aggregates, and the 6 sense bases. So these are teachings that I teach you in other programs, but you'll know at least that this is what you need to learn. Then you're going to need to be practicing what's called accomplishment in view. You guys might remember what is right view, which is the Four Noble Truths. Some of you guys might remember that. That's called being established in right view. But then there's a higher level practice. It's called accomplishment in view. And again, I teach this in the Pali Canon English study group. I teach it in the retreat in January and August. This is a higher level teaching, even beyond the Four Noble Truths. Then there's accomplishment in generosity. Accomplishment in generosity is being able to live open-handedly, being joyful in giving and sharing with others, where you're not being stingy and selfish. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will be practicing accomplishment in generosity, where you'll be willingly able to share. But you're doing that from the middle way. You're not overextending yourself and lacking resources, but you're also not on the other side where you're selfish. So you will have come to the middle where you're joyful in giving and sharing with the people around you. And you'll be doing that from the middle way. And it's a daily practice of practicing generosity, sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return, right? So you'll be able to easily be able to practice generosity, and you will already be doing that regularly by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. This is called accomplishment in generosity, being joyful in giving and sharing with others. Then you will have what's called association with wholesome persons. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have started making choices to include people in your life that are doing wholesome things, based on things like the 5 precepts, that you'll have understood the natural law of karma well enough that you understand that if you include people in your life that are doing unwise things, it's going to affect you. So for example, if I was a child hanging out with friends, maybe my childhood friends since I was 6 or 8 years old, 10, 12, 13 years old, we're all just hanging out. But let's just say around 18, this person starts selling drugs. And I've always known that they've sold drugs, and they never offered it to me. They never, asked me to buy drugs from them, but I just always knew that they've sold drugs. And we're hanging out, 18, 19, 20, 25 years old. We're all hanging out, having a good time. Again, they've never offered me any drugs. This is really unwise of me, right? Because now I'm walking down the street and some rival drug dealer sees my friend. They start shooting a gun, and those bullets are going to hit me, right? Potentially. Or say we're driving in a car, and now my friend who's a drug dealer is sitting in the seat next to me, and I'm driving and I get pulled over for speeding. And now when I'm not looking, they slip some cocaine under my seat. And now all of a sudden the police officer wants to search the car, and they get us all out of the car. I'm like, sure, go ahead. You can search the car because I know I don't have anything. Next thing they know, they find cocaine under my seat, and I'm going to jail for 10 years. Right? This is the unwholesome karma, or the unwholesome results of me choosing to associate with unwholesome persons. So if you understand the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, you will understand that it's unwise to associate with people like this. You're not judging them. You're not looking down on them. You're not thinking of yourself as being better than them. You just understand, like, okay, my friends started selling drugs. That's a choice for them to make. And I'm going to choose to not spend time with them because it would be unwise for me to do so, right? So by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have seen the natural law of karma so clearly that you won't be interested in spending time with people who are doing things like this, that are doing unwise things, right? So this is what the Buddha is teaching you here. Then he talks about, in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment and enlightenment itself, you would need to hear the true teachings. You can't get to the first stage of enlightenment without hearing the true teachings, right? Because there's certain things that you're going to need to know, and you wouldn't be able to get to that first stage of enlightenment without hearing his actual words and knowing exactly what he taught, and then practicing it to be able to train your mind. So you need to hear the true teachings. Then an individual who's in the first stage of enlightenment and beyond, they will be practicing what's called careful attention, meaning that you'll understand the natural law of karma so well that you know that every single decision you make, it's going to produce a certain result. And you'll pay careful attention to every single decision that you're making, understanding that every single thing you decide is going to produce a certain result. That's the natural law of karma. So you won't just haphazardly be going through life anymore. You'll be making decisions carefully as you go through life. Then you'll be practicing in accordance with the teachings. So not only have you heard the teachings, but you're going to be practicing them closely. That's what's going to take to be able to make your way through the stages of enlightenment, because that's where the real work is. If somebody just understood the teachings intellectually, they wouldn't be able to get to the stages of enlightenment. They just understand the teachings intellectually. They're not making decisions through those teachings. So, for example, when we grew up, our parents and our adults around us might have told us how unwise it is to use drugs and alcohol. And we understood that intellectually. But maybe we still did it. Maybe we still use drugs and alcohol at some point in our life. That's because we had the intellectual understanding that it was unwise, but we still had this lack of wisdom that we still did it because we weren't practicing what we were taught, right? So by the time you get to the stages of enlightenment, you will be practicing in accordance with the teachings. You'll be making decisions according to the teachings. You won't just have intellectual understanding of the teachings. You'll actually be practicing according to the teachings. And then also, by the time somebody gets to enlightenment and through the stages of enlightenment, they will maintain bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both in public and private, towards their companions on the path to enlightenment. What this means is that in order for you to get to enlightenment, you're going to need three things. And you might not have all of these right now, and it's okay. You're going to need confidence in the Buddha. You're going to need access to his teachings, and you're going to need to be part of a community. If you just have one or two of these things, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment. So if you just had confidence in the Buddha and you had access to his teachings, but you weren't part of a community, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. If you just had access to his teachings, but you didn't have confidence in the Buddha and you weren't part of a community, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. If you were part of a community, but you didn't have confidence in the Buddha and you didn't have access to his teachings, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So you need all three of these things, because confidence in the Buddha, that comes through investigation of his teachings and being able to see with 100% certainty that they're true and correct and that they're actually working to improve the condition of your mind and your life. That's where that confidence in the Buddha rises up. And then when you have access to his teachings, you can hear the true teachings and you'll actually be able to develop your mind. But you're going to need to be part of a community of other people who are practicing the teachings, because that's part of how your learning is going to happen. Because you'll learn when I'm talking to you like this. You'll learn when you're reading the books that I share, but you're also going to learn by observing other people. You're going to be like, wow, I really like how that person's so generous. I think I would like to do some more of that. Oh, I really like how that person asks questions. They're so polite and so respectful. I think I'm going to start doing some of that. So you'll learn from your teacher, but you're going to also learn from other members of a community. So when you're part of a community like this, those people are actually contributing to your enlightenment. Because if those people are practicing the teachings closely, you'll learn from that. Almost like a role model, without them even knowing that that's what you're doing, that you're just observing the wholesome qualities of another person, and then you'll start to also practice those same things. So when you understand this, that the people in your community are assisting you and supporting you to become enlightened, you'll get to the point where it would be impossible for you to say something like gossip or slander or be vindictive or angry or frustrated towards another member of the community, because you'll know how important these people are to you, because it's actually helping you to get to enlightenment by being part of a community. So you'll be able to maintain bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both publicly and privately, towards other members of your community, because you'll know how important a community is in order to be able to help you get to enlightenment. So this is part of what an individual would be practicing in order to get into the stages of enlightenment, because they're going to have deep respect and gratitude for the members of the community, because they're helping them to be able to get to enlightenment. They're like little role models for you to be able to see a little glimmer of something that somebody's doing that can contribute to your own growth and your own development. Okay, so these are some of the things that you would be practicing on your way to enlightenment. This is how to attain the 4 stages of enlightenment. You're practicing the Eightfold Path. You're eliminating the 10 fetters. You're learning and understanding and practicing these teachings. You're also practicing accomplishment in view, accomplishment in generosity. You're associating with wholesome persons. You're hearing the true teachings. You're paying careful attention to each decision that you're making. You're practicing in accordance with the teachings, not just understanding them intellectually, but you're actually practicing them and making decisions through the teachings. And then you're maintaining bodily, verbal, and mental acts of loving kindness, both publicly and privately. It's not a rule. It's just something you would do because you know how important it is to be a member of a community like this. Okay, so this is what you're going to need to do in order to get into the 4 stages of enlightenment. Any questions on this? Yes, sir.
Could you please explain a little more about the logic or the structure between, because on the previous page we have as the next page, is next. My question is, we have like the 4 stages of towards enlightenment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we also have like 10 feathers,
Mm-hmm.
and we also have like 8 what that called, the 8 passes to stages to something, and also we have like 4 stage of jhanas.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the logics? A little bit difficult for me to understand the structure of this training. I mean, it's like this is like the 4 stage, and stage 1 we have like 10 feathers, or we have like the jhanas. So what is the logic? I'm a little bit confused.
Sure.
About, yeah.
So first you're starting out with the Eightfold Path. And by practicing that really closely, that's helping to knock down a good deal of pollution out of your mind. And now the 4 jhanas, this is what you will experience. The Buddha didn't necessarily create this. This is just what he observed will happen as the mind is practicing the Eightfold Path. That you will experience these 4 phases that the mind will go through. And now the 4 stages of enlightenment, as your mind's moving through these 4 stages of enlightenment, you're eliminating these fetters. And you need to eliminate them generally in this particular order, right? Because, for example, personal existence view is part of what we refer to as the ego, okay? But there's something called conceit as well. You wouldn't be able to eliminate conceit without first eliminating personal existence view. So the Buddha put these in this order because this is the order that they need to be eliminated in. For example, sensual desire. Sensual desire is that longing, yearning, and wanting things to be a certain way. And if you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. And if you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. You wouldn't be able to eliminate the sensual desire, you wouldn't be able to eliminate the ill will without first eliminating the sensual desire. So that's why these 2 get eliminated together. Because of sensual desire, the mind is going to have ill will. You understand? So these are like organized in a certain way. Now let me explain this one too. Restlessness is like overactivity of the mind, where the mind is like, overactive. Okay. What's causing that overactivity in the mind is the sensual desire. So you actually wouldn't be able to eliminate restlessness without first eliminating sensual desire. So this progress on the path, he's walking you through a personal development plan of how to eliminate these fetters. And you wouldn't be able to eliminate them in a reverse order. Like you wouldn't be able to eliminate restlessness before eliminating sensual desire, because it's your sensual desire that's causing the restlessness. But once you eliminate sensual desire, there can still be a little bit of restlessness in the mind, a little overactivity in the mind. Is very subtle, but it's still there. So that's why it's a separate fetter.
So what is the relationship between the jhanas and the stages of enlightenment?
The jhanas is where you've built up certain qualities that are going to now allow you to then eliminate the fetters, right? So like that one where you're getting oneness of mind, where you can have the awareness of the entire mind. you wouldn't be able to eliminate these fetters if you didn't have that. So in the 4 jhanas, those 4 preliminary phases, these enhanced qualities of mind are supporting you to then be able to eliminate the fetters and get to the 4 stages of enlightenment. One of the ways you can think about it is the jhanas are kind of prepping your mind and kind of preparing it to be able to then eliminate the fetters.
It seems like the jhana's stage is superior to the 4 stage of enlightenment. Can I think in this way?
Yes, that's why I've taught it this way, that the jhanas are going to happen before the 1st stage of enlightenment. You can't get to the 1st stage of enlightenment until you've already experienced the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th jhana. You will have had to go through that first before you get to the 1st stage of enlightenment, because that's what's prepping your mind and preparing it to then be able to eliminate the first 3 fetters. Mm-hmm.
Before we enter the jhana's status, we need to understand the previous course, like yesterday, what we taught, right? So there's a sequence we learn, right?
That's why I've taught it in this sequence, because it's exactly the sequence that you're going to need to experience. And now that we're starting to talk about this, and we're going to talk about some other things as part of this course, that's where I mentioned to you, I said, you need to know where you're at in your practice, that right now, some of you guys, you just need to focus on the Eightfold Path. And that's really where you need to focus on. And even though you're going to be learning other things as part of this course, you just need to get to that later. But just really focus on the Eightfold Path. And you need to know where you're at in your own development. But at least you'll know what the future holds as you continue to work with the Eightfold Path. Mm-hmm. Yep, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions here. Okay, you're welcome, Linda. Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Pleased to help you. All right. Okay, so now let's talk about what a Buddha is, because I didn't mention that. I usually have a slide for that. I'm surprised it's not in here. A Buddha is an arahant. They've purified their mind. They've gotten to enlightenment. They've purified their mind of the 10 fetters, but they've done it in a unique way. They've done it by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Everybody else is going to need teachers and guides as part of the path to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without the help of a teacher or a guide, because you're not a Buddha. So an individual who's gotten to the purification of their mind as an arahant or as an enlightened being without the help of any teachers or any guides, this is the first criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. Then they're going to dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the 3 main criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So this is the 3 primary criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. What allows them to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides is they have one quality of mind that the average person doesn't have. A Buddha has an unlimited capacity to remember details. Even when they're unenlightened, they have a deep, profound memory. Each individual human being that is not a Buddha has a limited capacity to be able to remember things. We might think about it like a hard drive. You might have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte hard drive, right? So now as you're experiencing things in life and you reach capacity, you have to delete old files in order to store new files. So then in the last 5 or 10 years, you could probably recall just about all the things that you were doing, and you'd be able to talk about that easily. But if you go back to your childhood, you don't have direct recall of every single thing you were doing as a child. You have spotty memories. That's because you've had to delete those old files in order to store these new files, because you have a limited capacity. An individual who's going to become a Buddha, even in the unenlightened state, they have an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their current life in their previous lives as well. And what they do is they accumulate all this wisdom in their last life, and now they're able to get to enlightenment on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's how they actually do it, because they're accumulating all this wisdom over multiple lifetimes. So That's the fourth criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. The fifth criteria is that they can observe the quality of a person's mind by just spending some time with them. They can see these 10 fetters in other people's minds, right? These 10 fetters, because they've worked with those fetters within their own mind so closely that they can actually observe the fetters in somebody else's mind. And then the sixth criteria is that they're going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach by spoken word, they're going to be practicing those same things as well. Because an individual who's a Buddha, they understand that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So an individual who's a Buddha is not only going to be teaching through their spoken words, but they're going to be teaching through their actions too, in the way that they conduct themselves. So these are the 6 criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. And this is very rare in the world. The last Buddha that the world currently is aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. So you'll find people today that will tell you that everybody is a Buddha. But this isn't actually true. The Buddha never taught that. The Buddha taught that it's very rare for this type of individual to exist in the world. He referred to himself as a Tathagata. This means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. So a Buddha doesn't go around trying to convince other people that they are a Buddha. That's not something that a Buddha needs in order to be able to actually help people to get to enlightenment. So a Buddha's ability to help others isn't dependent on other people knowing that they are a Buddha. In fact, it's better if people don't know who a Buddha is. Because if everybody knew who a Buddha was, like say there was a certain turn of the ear or a certain mole, and everyone was like, oh, that's a Buddha. Well, you'd probably be on your best behavior when you're around that person. So now this ability for them to be able to observe your mind and provide you teachings that are going to help you to overcome your pollutions, it's rendered useless because they can't see your natural mind. So a Buddha is going to not need to go out into the world and convince others that they're a Buddha. That's why a Buddha doesn't perform countless miracles in order to convince people that they're an actual Buddha. They would much rather people not know that they are an actual Buddha, because then they can actually be more effective at helping people to get to enlightenment. So these are the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. And it's very rare to exist in the world with a Buddha. So Gautama Buddha is the last Buddha that the people are aware of. And you'll actually hear people refer to him in different ways. Some people call him Gautama Buddha or the Buddha. Someone might call him aesthetic Gautama or master Gautama. There's all these different ways. Mostly they refer to him as master Gautama or aesthetic Gautama or teacher Gautama or master teacher Gautama. People didn't walk around referring to him as the Buddha, right? He would refer to himself as the Tathagata, the one who's discovered the truth, the one who shares the truth. But you can see in his teachings where he did refer to himself occasionally as the Buddha, because he needed to teach the world what is a Buddha, because humanity didn't know what a Buddha was up to that point. So he needed to help people to understand that. So this is what a Buddha is. It's not a stage of enlightenment. An individual who is a Buddha, they're an arahant or an enlightened being just like everyone else. It's just that they've done it differently. They've done it without the help of any teachers or guides. So their wisdom is very deep and very profound about the path to enlightenment. They understand it inside and out, backwards and forward. And then they spend the rest of their life essentially illuminating that path, putting lights down along the path so more and more people can see where the path to enlightenment is, right? So they're illuminating the path, putting down these lights along the side of the path. And then it's important not to change the teachings of a Buddha. If you change the teachings of the Buddha, it's like knocking over the lights. And now it's harder for all the people behind you to be able to understand where the path to enlightenment is. So a Buddha is going to spend a lot of time putting lights along the side of the path to make it very clear exactly what it takes to get to enlightenment. And then you would be interested in not changing those teachings so that you and other people can make their way on the path to enlightenment. So any questions on this? Yep.
This first stage of enterer, it said that 7 times back to the human realm, right? There's a
maximum of 7 times. So there won't be an 8th existence, but it could be 1, 2, 3, something like that.
Is there any standard to define why it's less than 7? Buddha find out the standard or what?
I suspect what happened is the Buddha must have seen that he was a stream enterer 7 times, and that's how he knew. Because for me, I've seen 2 previous human existences, and I saw many countless animals before that. And I know what I was doing in that first and second human existence, and I know what I'm doing now. So I know that it's less than 7, but I don't have a way to verify the 7. But I know that the teachings of the Buddha lead exactly where he said they do. I've verified his teachings, and I can see that it leads exactly where he says they do. So I have no problems with having confidence that the number 7 that he came up with is 100% the truth, because everything else that he shared led exactly where he said they do. So I have 100% confidence in his teachings. But I haven't had 7 lives to be able to 7 human lives to be able to verify the number 7, but he must have, or else he wouldn't have taught it, because a Buddha obviously doesn't lie, right? They're not going to tell any lies. And they're only going to teach what it is that they know to be true through their own direct experience.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying that you have this experience that you have like 2 lifetimes, that you have this memories?
Yeah, I have memories.
Can you share with us some of your experience?
I have memories from 2 previous human existences and countless animals before that. I usually don't share too much about it because you would just have to believe me. And I don't like to teach based on belief. I like to teach things that you can independently verify. And if I told it to you, it's just like, oh, okay, that's interesting, right? You'd have no way of verifying what I'm teaching you is true. But I have lots of memories from those 2 human lives, particularly the one right before this. The first one, I have some memories, but not much. Mostly what I have memories from that life is the teachings of the Buddha, because I was learning and practicing the teachings in both of those lives. In that first life, I have a lot of recall of the teachings themselves. But in the second life, not only do I have that recall, but I have recall of what was going on in that life, a lot of that. I usually don't talk about it much because it's not going to help you get to enlightenment. But that's how I was able to verify. One way that I was able to verify the cycle of rebirth and the things that the Buddha teaches. That was one of the things that I experienced that helped me to be able to independently verify it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, no more questions or questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A quick question is like, why Buddha is so special?
In my opinion, this is because it's all, basically why someone is special is based on your opinions, right? In my opinion, a Buddha is so special because to get to enlightenment, even with the help of teachers and guides, you will see it's challenging. It's going to take a lot of work and effort from you to be able to get to enlightenment. But to be able to get to enlightenment by yourself without the help of any teachers or any guides, that's a monumental feat to be able to do that. And to persevere through that, because it took him 6 years to get to enlightenment, to persevere through that for 6 years and choosing to step away from his royal heritage, because he was a prince destined to become a king, and he stepped away from that into this journey where he did this really deep, hard work for 6 years to be able to get to enlightenment. But then he spent another 45 years sharing his teachings from that life of being homeless. And he did it selflessly without any expectation of anything from his students, because he knew that sharing these teachings was the very best thing he could do with his life to be able to help countless people get to enlightenment. To me, that makes him very special, because he did this for other people. Because he could have very easily went back to the royal palace and been like, yep, I'm done. This mind's enlightened. I got all these riches and all this life. I'm just going to hang out here. This is great. I figured out how to get to enlightenment. He could have done that, right? But an individual who's a Buddha, they wouldn't do that, because they have such loving kindness and compassion for the whole world that they know if they don't share their teachings, that the rest of the world is just going to keep suffering. And they're not interested in seeing that occur. So they're interested in helping others. And for him to persevere, we could say, for 51 years, right? And to be able to give back to the world what he gave us, That's very special to me.
And also, like it feels like he has a lot of like from like the seven you share like 7 or 6 like the about like a Buddha, right? It's like or accomplishment of the Buddha, and it's feel like he has a lot of superpower, like the memory or can memory everything, and of course like the accomplishment you just mentioned, like right, and it just curious like why he is the one become Buddha. Why not someone else? Like maybe today in this world, someone can become Buddha. I mean, not from outside accomplishment, but from like a inside the mind perspective, like become like the stage as Buddha.
It's the karma, the cause and effect, the results of decisions that were made. So he talks about his previous lives, and he explains the things that he did in his previous lives that led to him being able to become a Buddha in his last life. And one of the biggest things he talks about is his generosity, that he was very generous in his past lives, where he was giving and sharing extensively. And that's one of the biggest criterias that led to him becoming a Buddha in his last life. So the thing that allowed him to do it was that aspect of the mind, that he had an unlimited capacity to be able to remember countless details. But the thing that led to that was this extensive amount of generosity that he practiced throughout all of his lives. So he points to that as being one of the main criteria that allowed him to become a Buddha in his last life. So it's cause and effect, action and result. Yeah, you're welcome.
So, our Buddha, the Buddha, he's the last. It's implied that there have been others before Buddhas. Say there's the Buddha. He's sort of has the recipe that we're studying. Previous Buddhas, would it have been a similar outcome, but a different route to get there? Do people go into this wondering what the teachings of previous Buddhas would have been? Because one of the criterion is that they do continue to teach and pass it on.
Okay, so a individual, so this is the only conflict that you will see in the Pali Canon. There's places in the Pali Canon that document the Buddha as having said that there were previous Buddhas before him. You'll see that in the Pali Canon. But you'll also see in the Pali Canon where the Buddha is documented as having said that he's the discoverer, the declarer, the originator of the path to enlightenment, undeclared before him, meaning there weren't any Buddhas before him. This is the only conflict that I've really seen in the Pali Canon. So whether there were Buddhas before him or not, we don't have any evidence of that other than in the Pali Canon, but there's this conflict. And it really doesn't matter, even though this is interesting. This is a question that comes up all the time, and I'm interested in it too, but you'll just never know, right? That whether there were Buddhas before him or not, it actually doesn't matter, because he shared the teachings that you need in order to be able to get to enlightenment, and we have his teachings. If there were Buddhas before him, the teachings would have been exactly the same. In terms of the underlying natural laws, but in terms of the analogies that were used or what they were talking about, those would have been different, right? Like today we talk about being attached to a cell phone, right? They didn't talk about that in the past, right? So the teachings would have been the same. But this particular Buddha, we have his teachings, and you can learn and practice his teachings. And that's what's important, is to be able to learn and practice his teachings. If there were Buddhas before him, okay, great. If there weren't, okay, that's fine too. We have his teachings and we know what leads to enlightenment. And that's what I would encourage people to focus on. But it is interesting to talk about and discuss. The Buddha did talk about a future Buddha. He he talked about a Buddha after him that would come. And he referred to this Buddha as Maitreya Buddha, which the word Maitreya means loving kindness, that this new Buddha would have an enormous amount of loving kindness for the world. And that's what a Buddha would have, is enormous amount of loving kindness. So his teachings of the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, would be very much the same as this new Buddha. This new Buddha would need to be able to resurrect those teachings and be able to share them in a way that would reach the entire world. Mm-hmm. Question?
So we talk about, like you asked about, enlightenment being will remember the past life.
Mm-hmm.
And when do people remember their past life? Like just want to know, like in which stage, when they enter the jhana, like the first jhana or the last jhana, or like even people without going to jhana, they could remember past life. Because sometimes I heard people said, like they would suddenly remember some pieces of memory of something they didn't experience. So yeah.
So not everybody will see their past lives on the way to enlightenment. There'll be some people that will and some people that won't. But everybody will need to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. That's why in volume 11, chapter 105, I have 17 criteria that help you to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. One of them is having observed past lives. So that's a potential, but not everybody will have that. A lot of people have certain things that they might not be associating with the cycle of rebirth and having observed past lives. I think you were here when I was talking about it the other day of deja vu. Do you know deja vu, right? So a lot of people experience that, but they don't realize that that's their residual memories from their past lives bubbling up to their mind, and they just kind of discount it and push it away. So a lot of people have experienced that, but there's other things you can experience too. It's not a particular moment in your development that you'll experience this, because you can experience it at all different times. Like I experienced as early as 8 years old some memories from previous lives, but I just didn't know that's what that was at the time. But I would say that when your mind's in the jhanas, that's where things are really opening up for you. Your mind's really opening up, where you get that oneness of mind and you start seeing the entire mind. That's where a lot of this stuff is really happening. But that's not to say you couldn't have memories of previous lives before that, because you could. Prior to the jhanas, you could have some memories of previous lives. But in the jhanas, this is where it's very likely to occur, where your mind's really opening up. So we call the 4 jhanas, and we call the 4 stages of enlightenment, we call them attainments. These are attainments that one will experience. There's other attainments besides these that I'm not teaching you right now, that it's in the Pali Canon, it's in the book series, and I teach it as part of the book series in the Pali Canon and English study group. There's these other attainments. There's 4 other attainments that we're not talking about right now, that those will usually happen during the jhanas. And one of those is to be able to observe past lives. But that's not to say that you wouldn't be able to have memories before that, because you could. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You guys are question class. Small class, but lots of questions. That's good.
When we talk about Buddha, we mean the Buddha. Okay? So in Chinese culture, it's like we have a lot of Buddhas. It's like multi-god system. So any comments about that kind of multi-god system versus the single Buddha system?
Yeah, I know that there's only one. I think you said God, right? Yeah, I know that there's only one. I know that there's only one God. I've had interaction with this being. I've verified this being's existence in multiple ways. I know that there was at least this Buddha, the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, and I don't know of anything outside of that. I know that the Buddha used to teach that there's multiple gods, but I don't have any evidence of that. And I suspected he was teaching that because that's what people believed at the time. So he was helping them to understand their current beliefs. But like I was just sharing with Boulder, is that whether there were Buddhas before him or not, it doesn't really matter at this point. We don't have any evidence that there were, but there's no evidence that there weren't any Buddhas either. Once you understand the path to enlightenment and you understand the level of intellectual conversation that needs to happen in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you will see that it wasn't really until about 2,500 years ago that human beings had that level of conversation. Because, when we first came onto this planet, anywhere from 200,000 years ago to 2 million years ago, that's what people say, right? Scientists give us that number. We were just grunting and moaning at each other. We couldn't talk. We were just grunting and moaning, right? Eventually, language developed enough where about 2,500 years ago, we could have intelligent conversation, right? And that's where now there would be someone like the Buddha who could explain how to get to enlightenment. Where prior to that, there couldn't have been enough intellectual conversation in order to be able to have a Buddha that could describe how to get to enlightenment. So that's 200,000 years ago to 2 million years ago. This planet has been here for 4.5 billion years. That's the best estimate, right? So if there were any civilizations prior to 2 million years ago, which we just don't even have records of, we don't have any knowledge of, there could have been humanity in those civilizations, and they could have developed and evolved and had conversation, and potentially those beings could have gotten to enlightenment. Who knows? Some of those beings could have done that, but we don't have any records of that. So that's where I say the only evidence that I have is that this Buddha for sure lived. There may or may not have been Buddhas before him, but I don't think if it occurred, it was during this run of humanity, which was 200,000 years ago to 2 million years ago. I don't think it was within our humanity. It would have been prior to that if it had existed prior to, at any prior time. But whether it did or didn't happen, no way of knowing. I just encourage you to focus on getting to enlightenment in this life. But these things are interesting to talk about. Yeah. But, there's different beliefs out there. So you're going to see people believing that there were multiple Buddhas. Okay, there's multiple Buddhas. Fine. You still got to get to enlightenment. You still got to train your mind. Okay, there was only one Buddha. Okay, fine. You still got to train your mind. You still got to get to enlightenment. Right? It's like, doesn't matter, truthfully. But if you focus on this Buddha's teachings, you'll be able to make your way to enlightenment. Mm-hmm. Yep. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. You have a question brewing. I see. You need a mic. You got one right there by your leg. Yep. Boulder's questions brew for a while. I can
know.
see them.
I'll be quick.
Yeah.
Just this discussion of this and sort of multiple Buddhas, where's the proof and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. The second fetter there, doubt. I can't read it. But does that have to do with letting go of all doubt of how?
No.
I'm
going to teach you here next. Okay. There's another question, I think, coming in from Linda. She says, I have another question. Could you please describe when and how these old memories return? Did Buddha teach anything about this? And could you please describe your experiences of when and how these memories of, for example, past lives come up to us? Did this occur during meditation? It can occur during meditation, but it's not only during meditation. These thoughts can actually arise at any time. It's not like any structured way, and you're not going to be able to induce it. And even if you could, it's unwise to try because you won't really trust that that's the case. I'll just give you one simple example. Like there was a time when I was laying in bed as an 8-year-old child, that each night when I would go to sleep, I had this excruciating pain in my legs. And I would call out to my parents and I would be like, my legs. And I would be crying and upset. I had so much pain in my legs. And this happened for many weeks and many months even. This was going on. And my parents would rush into my room and like, what's going on? What's going on? Right. And they couldn't see anything that was wrong. And they just went back to bed, right? Quiet down, go to sleep. We're sleeping. So that was just a memory that was coming to my mind, because later in life, in my mid 40s, I realized that I had been murdered in my previous life and my legs were broken, right? And that's where that was coming from. But I didn't know that at 8 years old. So there were many events like that throughout my life that had occurred that really all got pieced together for me in my mid 40s. So these things can happen at all different times during your life. And it can happen in meditation, but it's not only during meditation that this kind of thing occurs. Okay, so I was intending to give you guys a break and then move into this next topic. If you guys would like to use the bathroom or get a snack or whatever, feel free to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep teaching to help you guys to understand more, because it's about 2:30 and I'd like to just be attentive to the time and making sure you guys have an opportunity to learn each of the things that I have to share with you guys. So I'm going to kind of give you an abbreviated talk on these 10 fetters, because you guys were more interested in the 4 stages of enlightenment, and I just let each class go wherever it needs to go. I don't have kind of a predetermined way that I need to teach, but I usually spend about an hour talking about this. So now we'll have about 30 minutes, so it'll be kind of abbreviated talk. Okay, so there's these 10 fetters, which you've been hearing about, and each one of these fetters are pollutions in the mind. We call them fetters because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were someone like a criminal that they were trying to keep confined to a certain area, there would be a shackle and a chain and a ball placed around your ankle, and then you would get turned out into a field, and then you would just stay in that area because you would be confined to that area because the shackle, chain, and ball was too heavy. You couldn't carry it around. So the shackle, chain, and ball is what's called a fetter. That's a fetter. So when the Buddha discovers these 10 pollutions in the mind, he calls them fetters because it's trapping the mind in this unenlightened state where you keep experiencing the same difficulties and struggles over and over and over again. So he refers to these pollutions as fetters. So we might refer to them as pollutions or taints or defilements, but of course we still refer to them as fetters as well, but you need to know what a fetter is. Okay, so there's the lower fetters and then there's the higher fetters. I'm going to walk you through these. So personal existence view, we talked about this yesterday, right? We talked about how the mind clings to a self-image or a self-identity, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now if you go out into the world and you're being perceived that way, you have pleasant feelings. But if you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, the mind experiences painful feelings. This is why when you're in a social situation, if you spill something on your clothing, you're embarrassed. It's because of your personal existence view. You think that this body is you, and the mind's clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy if you're being perceived that way. Or if you see a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or gray hair, or you start losing your hair and you get shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view. You're clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. Or if you've ever stood in front of your closet and thought about, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to look? And what clothes do I want to wear? This is the mind's personal existence view, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way, right? We could explain all these different details. I usually explain to people how I used to get gel and mousse and I'd run it through my hair and try to get every little hair in exactly the right spot before I go to school. This is personal existence view, right? So it can happen with your image, your self-image. It can also happen with your self-identity, your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You can cling to any of this, thinking that this is who you are. Like, I am Chinese. I am German. I'm sorry, I don't know where you're from. Where are you from? I am Italian, right? Or I am Icelandic, right? Any of this, I am, right? I am not American. This body was born on a land that we refer to as America, but my mind doesn't have to adopt the identity of I am American. Because if it does, when I'm at a restaurant and 2 tables over, someone's like, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle, I would get all these pleasant feelings like, wow, they're talking about me, right? But then 2 tables over, they say something degrading and disparaging about Italian people or Chinese people or German people or Icelandic people. They say something degrading and disparaging. And now you think they're talking about me. And now you're frustrated and angry and irritated. So as long as you have this pollution in your mind, you can't be peaceful and joyful permanently because you're clinging to this self-image, wanting to be perceived a certain way. You're craving permanence when this body is not permanent, or you're clinging to an identity in your mind of who you think you are, right? If you cling to a job or occupation thinking that's who you are, well, when you're not doing that job anymore, you'll feel like less of a person, right? And we could explain this in more and more detail. I'm actually going to be talking about this one when we get to the point in this course where we talk about the ego. So I'm going to talk about this in more detail. But you can see the problems here, right? As long as you have this in your mind, you can't be permanently peaceful. So you need to uproot it and eliminate it. And we're going to focus on it more closely when we talk about the ego. Then there's something called doubt. People typically come to the path to enlightenment with doubt. You actually might have doubt in your mind right now. And that's okay if that's where you're at. What doubt is where you have doubt about the Buddha, his teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. If you have doubt about any of these things, you won't be able to get to enlightenment. But you might start out with doubt, and that's normal, where you doubt the Buddha. Did this person even live? Was he enlightened? Was he as smart and wise as everyone says he is? Will his teachings actually lead to enlightenment? Will this community support me in getting to enlightenment? Does this teacher even know how to get to enlightenment? Do you have the ability to get to enlightenment? You might think that there's no way you can do it. So this is what doubt is. The way you eliminate your doubt is through investigation of the teachings. You don't eliminate doubt through blind belief or faith. That's not how you eliminate it. You need to investigate and examine the teachings. Then you reflect on them to independently verify if they're true or false. Then you practice the teachings. And as you're practicing them and you see the quality of your mind improving, and you see the quality of your relationships and your life improving, you'll know it's these teachings that are doing that. Right? So you get rid of your doubt by investigating the teachings. That's what's going to help you get past it. So if you have doubt right now, that's fine. That's where you're at. That's what most people have when they come to the path to enlightenment. I had doubt when I first came to the path to enlightenment, but I harnessed this doubt. And here's what you can do to harness the doubt. You can turn it into an inquisitive mind. You can say, yes, I don't think this way anymore, but yes, I doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I do not know whether they lead to enlightenment or not. And you know what? I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to sink my teeth in, and I'm going to try to understand them as best of my ability. And I'm going to try to see if they lead to enlightenment or not. That's how you get rid of your doubt. You can harness this doubt, turn it into an inquisitive mind. And now it's going to be beneficial to you rather than a detriment. Because as a pollution of mind, it's a detriment to you. It will hinder you from getting to enlightenment, right? So those people that I was talking to you about that were in the jhanas and then their conceit rose up, they had doubt. They had doubt whether this teacher could lead them to enlightenment or not. And they started doubting that, right? And that's what takes them away from the path to enlightenment, because doubt will hinder you from getting to enlightenment. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. What wrong behavior is there's certain moral conduct that you have right now in the way that you interact with people that is producing unwholesome results for you. And as long as you continue to have wrong behavior, you're going to keep putting out harmful conduct, and it's going to keep coming back to you. So look at your relationships. There's probably certain people that you're bitter and harsh and hostile to, right? And as long as you put that out, that's what's going to come back to you. So by the time you get rid of wrong behavior, you will have brought your practice up to the Eightfold Path, where you're practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood. If you guys can remember back to yesterday, that's part of your practice. And you'll be practicing that at all times in order to be able to get rid of wrong behavior. There's more work on your moral conduct that you need to do beyond this, but you will have at least gotten to the level of the Eightfold Path. The way you might think about this is that if you had an oil pipe and it had busted and it was spewing oil all over the world, well, you're not going to go clean up the mess on the floor first. You're going to shut down the oil pipe. and make sure it doesn't spew any more oil in the world. Well, what you're doing is you're spewing unwholesome moral conduct into the world, and you need to shut that down, because as long as you keep spewing unwholesome and harmful moral conduct into the world, it's just going to keep coming back to you. So how could you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if you keep spewing this unwholesome moral conduct into the world? Because you're just going to keep experiencing harmful things coming back to you over and over and over again. So you're going to need to bring your moral conduct up to the point where you've improved it to a certain degree based on the Eightfold Path. What wrong observances is, this is where the mind thinks that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship or prayer is going to lead to some type of beneficial result in your life in terms of getting to enlightenment. That the mind thinks that, oh, if I just get that monk to sprinkle water on me, everything will be better. Or if they tie this string on my wrist, then everything will be great and I'll get some kind of benefit. Or maybe if I go to this place and I take this piece of bread on my tongue and my mouth and I eat this wafer, maybe that's going to make me feel better, right? So wrong observances is thinking that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship or prayer is going to somehow lead to improvement, because an individual doesn't understand the number one problem. The number one problem that the Buddha discovered is the lack of wisdom in the mind, the ignorance, the unknowing of true reality. So someone who's doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, things like that, they still think that they can worship their way to a better life, or that they can do rituals in order to get to a better life. So you would have eliminated the thinking of wrong observances. Whether you do those things or not, that's a whole separate question, right? Like, let's just say you're hanging out with your family and friends, and your family's like, hey, we're going to go out to a family dinner, but we're going to go to the church first and do this little service, or we're going to go to the synagogue or the temple or the mosque. And you're like, all right, sure, let's go. And now, like, you head out with your family, right? You're heading out with your family and friends. And now maybe they go to the church or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque, and you see them doing all the rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship, but your mind knows doesn't lead to enlightenment. But what they choose to do, it's up to them, right? You would know in your mind that these things don't lead to enlightenment. But those people might not know that, and that's what they're choosing to do. But by the time you get rid of wrong observances, you will have seen that very clearly, that these rituals and ceremonies aren't leading to any beneficial results in your life. And oftentimes before someone comes in learning with me, they've actually already eliminated this part, because they know I don't do any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So they are already coming with that one, that part of it already eliminated from their mind. Okay, so that's what wrong behavior and observances is. Sensual desire, we were talking about this earlier. This is where the mind is longing, yearning through the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself for permanently agreeable contact. And now when you experience agreeable contact, you get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you get disagreeable contact, that's where the painful feelings comes in. This is the mind longing, yearning through the 6 sense bases: the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. The mind is wanting pleasurable and agreeable things to be permanent, right? So this is the central desire. When we talk about craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations, we're pretty much talking about central desire. There's other cravings, desires, attachments that aren't part of central desire, but this is the main one. This is like a big significant portion of it. So that's what central desire is. The mind's longing, yearning through the sense bases. I want that money. If I just get that money, everything will be better in my life. If I just get that bigger house, everything will be better. If I can just get that whatever, shopping, if I can just get those shoes, everything will be better in my life. Oh, I just can't wait to get those shoes. That's the central desire. Then the ill will is the anger, the hatred, the hostility, the bitterness, even the slightest dislike towards others. So there's a spectrum here. When we talk about central desire and ill will, there's a spectrum. There's central desires like maybe like you go into 7-Eleven and you want a bag of M&Ms and they don't have your M&Ms and you're like, man, darn it, I don't have my M&Ms, right? You're a little bit irritated by it. But then there's central desires like you want your mom to be alive, and when she dies, you're really upset by that, right? That's a really deep, strong central desire, a very deep attachment, right? And the same thing's true with ill will. You can have a little small like dislike towards somebody, or you can have a lot of anger and bitterness and hostility where you're venting your anger at somebody. So there's a spectrum here, and it's going to depend on how strong your central desire is. If you have a really small central desire, like a bag of M&Ms, you'll just have a little bit of irritation. But if you have a really deep, strong central desire, now you're going to have a lot of deep anger, hatred, and ill will. Right? So there's a real spectrum here. But your ill will is this hostility and bitterness and harshness towards others, because the mind's central desire is not getting fulfilled. Right? So you pull up to that traffic light, the person has on music that you don't like, and now you're angry or frustrated at them, or you're irritated or annoyed with that person. Right? But you could also have a lot of deep anger and hatred towards someone too. Like maybe somebody scratches your car, and now maybe you're really attached to this car, and you can have real hostility towards them because you have a deeper attachment. So the ill will is the anger, hatred, and ill will, but all those lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance, even the slightest dislike towards another being. So that's what the central desire and ill will are. Any questions on any of these 5 lower fetters? Have a question? Yep.
What is the lower mean? And I believe there's another 5 for higher. And
Yeah.
what's the difference?
These are the ones that you will have eliminated by the time you get to the 3rd stage of enlightenment. So they're the lower fetters, are the first ones to start focusing on. Doesn't mean you can't work on the higher fetters, because you can, but it's just that we separate them in the lower fetters and higher fetters, because in order to get to enlightenment, you would need to eliminate all the fetters. But the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd stage of enlightenment, those would be the lower fetters. And now there's these higher fetters, which these higher fetters, they are dependent on you getting rid of the lower fetters. If you didn't get rid of the lower fetters, you wouldn't be able to eliminate the higher fetters. You can still work on these, but you wouldn't be able to completely eliminate them without first eliminating the lower fetters.
Got it. So usually we work on the lower one first.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't work on the higher ones. Like, for
Got it.
example, like right here, conceit. Conceit is arrogance, pride, measuring and comparing, thinking that you're above people or below people. You can be working on that right now, right? You're walking down the street, you see your mind judging someone, looking down on them. You can cut that off and be like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? So it doesn't mean that you couldn't work on it. It just means that you can't eliminate it entirely until the lower fetters are eliminated.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now, desire for form and formless, I'll talk about these together because they're very similar. What desire for form is where you have a craving or desire to be in one of the form realms, like the human realm or the animal realm. Those are the realms that have physical form. So if you want, long and yearn to be in this human life, your mind's holding on to this life. And when you get close to death, it'll be very painful for you because you don't want to leave this life, not understanding that this life is impermanent. It's not permanent. So you would have desire for form. I really want to be alive, right? But also you're not interested in being on the other side where it's like, I don't want to be here at all. I just want to kill myself. This is called craving for existence or craving for non-existence. Those are 2 opposite extremes, and you're not interested in either one of those. You'd like to be in the middle where it's like, yep, there is this human life, and let me make the best of it, right? And now let me make my way to enlightenment. But if you have a desire for existence or a craving for existence, you're holding on to this life and wanting it to be permanent, right? And that's what desire for form is. But you're also not interested in being on the other side where you desire to die and you want to commit suicide, right? You'd like to be in the middle where you understand that, yes, there is this life and I'm going to make the best of it, but you're not holding on to either side. So people can do this with the human realm, but also the animal realm. Have you ever thought like, wow, it'd be so nice to be a bird. I want to be a bird. At one time I was interested in being a bird. I was like, wow, that'd be so cool to just fly around, kind of check things out. That would be really cool, right? That's desire for form. You want to exist in another existence. You're not content in the current existence. You want something that you don't have. That would be desire for form. Then there's desire for formless. Desire for formless is wanting to exist in one of the formless realms: hell, afflicted spirits, which are ghosts, or the heavenly realm. It's rare that people want to be in hell, but there are some people who want to be in hell. It's also rare that people want to be a ghost, but there's some people who want to be a ghost. More likely, people want to be in heaven. They have this longing, yearning to be in heaven because they think heaven is a glorious place and they think it's permanent. It's not permanent. Those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth. It's not a permanent existence. You can see the world around you is impermanent. It's constantly changing. So this heavenly realm is not permanent. You can see that to be the truth for yourself by looking around the world, that everything's constantly changing. So if you have a desire to be in hell, afflicted spirit, or heavenly realm, then you still want existence. You're not content in the present existence. You're still longing, yearning for something else. So your mind has craving, desire, attachment. So by the time you eliminate desire for form and desire for formless, you will have eliminated the fear of death. You will no longer be fearful of death. Your mind will have eliminated that. And there's ways for you to accomplish that. And you won't have this longing, yearning to be in any of the 5 realms. We were just talking about conceit a little bit. This is the measuring and comparing, putting yourself above or below people, thinking that you're better or superior to other people or inferior to other people. And both of these are just as dangerous for your mind. If you put yourself above people and you look down on people, people are going to push you aside. They're not going to be interested in being around you. But if you put yourself below people and you look up with such awe and admiration to people, you're going to be shaken up when you're around people. Like you go into your boss's office and you're going to be all shaken up. So if you put yourself above people, there's more likely than not, you also put yourself below people in certain situations. And it's going to motivate unskillful conduct. And now when you're in your boss's office all shaken up and you can't even get 2 words together to speak, now they don't have confidence in you and you don't get promoted in your job or your career. So putting yourself above or below people is dangerous for the mind. And this is coming from our animal existences because we needed a pecking order in the animal realm. We needed to know who's above us and who's below us, or else we wouldn't have survived. Where in the human realm, we don't need that. So we're going to talk about this when we talk about the ego, and I'm going to explain to you how to eliminate it. When we talk about the word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he actually separated it as personal existence view and conceit. And it's actually wise that he did it that way because the symptoms are actually different and the solutions are actually different. But we're combining it and we're calling it the ego nowadays. So I'm going to teach this to you in a later class. I think it's tomorrow or the next day. I think it's tomorrow that I'm going to be teaching you guys about the ego and teaching you how to eliminate it. But this is part of what's in the mind. In the unenlightened state, there's this conceit. I'm better than everyone. If everybody just did it my way, the world would be perfect, right? This is the way the mind thinks in conceit. Or I'm so handsome, right? I'm handsomer than this person over there, that person over there, right? This is the conceit, right? So restlessness. Restlessness is the overactivity of the mind, where you'll have eliminated a lot of that by eliminating sensual desire, but there's still going to be some residual restlessness in the mind. If you sit somewhere and you kind of tap your leg, or you tap your foot, or you tap your finger, or you just can't sit still and you got to be moving all the time, this is what's going on in the mind, that the mind is the boss, the body is the employee. So when you're sitting there tapping, this is because you have an overactive mind. It's just coming out through the body. That's all it is, because the mind is the boss and the body is the employee. So you can get rid of your sensual desire, but you can still have some restlessness. And you're going to need to get to the point where your mind's nice and calm and you're not constantly doing that or tapping your finger or tapping a pencil and things like that, because that's indicative of your mind is overactive or restless. Then the fetter of all fetters is called ignorance. Right? I like to refer to this as the unknowing of true reality, confusion, misunderstanding, lack of wisdom. That's the fetter of all fetters, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. For example, the mind doesn't understand the 10 fetters. It doesn't even understand these pollutions are there. It doesn't understand that they exist. The mind doesn't understand that it's causing its own anger. It's causing its own frustration and guilt and shame, and has no idea. It's blaming other people for the feelings that you're experiencing. That's the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So the mind doesn't understand things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots, the natural law of karma, the cycle of rebirth, on and on and on and on. There's all these teachings that the Buddha is teaching you that are true, that you can independently verify, but the mind's ignorant to them. It's unknowing of true reality. That's the one that keeps the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. If it wasn't for that fetter, none of the rest of them would exist. So in terms of each individual being, if you're making your way to enlightenment, the ignorance is the very last thing to be eliminated. And the way you eliminate your ignorance is through your practice. You don't eliminate ignorance through intellectual understanding. You need the intellectual understanding, but the way that your ignorance gets eliminated is through your practice. This is where I was explaining that intellectually you can understand that drugs and alcohol are unwise, but if you're still using drugs and alcohol, the mind has ignorance. It's unknowing of true reality. It's making unwise decisions, not realizing you're putting poison into the body that's affecting the mind, and now you're making unwise decisions. So there can be intelligence or intellectual understanding, but it's not yet wisdom where you're actually making decisions through that. So if there's any other fetter in the mind, there's still ignorance in the mind because the mind hasn't understood the wisdom of how to fully purify itself. So the way that you're getting rid of this ignorance is through practicing the teachings. You need to first understand them intellectually, then reflect on them to verify them, and then practice them. This is the one that's keeping all the other fetters involved. So that's like these wrong observances. That's coming from the ignorance that the mind just doesn't understand. It thinks that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, prayer is going to lead to some kind of beneficial result. So the mind keeps doing it. So yes, it is wrong observances, but there's also ignorance as well. When the mind is having sensual desire and it's sitting there at the traffic light and it hears that music over there, and now the anger comes up and you're frustrated at that person, yes, there's sensual desire and ill will there, but there's also ignorance as well. The mind doesn't understand. You're causing your own anger. You're causing your own frustration. So each one of these fetters, if there's a fetter involved, it has ignorance as well. And that's why the ultimate goal on the path to enlightenment is to cultivate wisdom. Don't believe any of the teachings. You can't get to enlightenment through belief, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. That's why you need to be able to learn, investigate, examine, reflect, independently verify, and then practice the teachings. That's what's going to lead to your wisdom. Then you see the truth, and nobody can shake you off of that truth. How many of you guys grew up with the idea of Santa Claus? Any of you guys grew up with the idea of Santa Claus? 2, 3 of you guys? Okay, all the Chinese people, you didn't have Santa Claus. Good. That's wonderful. You have so many other things, right? Like the golden dragon or something, right? All right. Well, you understand at least the concept of Santa Claus, right? Okay. So when I was growing up, I believed in Santa Claus. I was taught to believe in Santa Claus. And wow, this was a great time of year, right? You couldn't wait till Santa Claus came, right? Well, at 8 years old, I came downstairs on Christmas morning and my sister was like, David, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. I was like, what? They're like, I saw mom and dad eating the cookie and milk last night. It's them. And I was crushed, right? Because my beliefs got shaken up, right? Because I was believing in this Santa Claus figure. But then when I heard the truth, my mind was all shaken up by that. So with belief, you don't know what's true or false, and it's easy for your mind to get shaken up. But when you know wisdom, when you have wisdom, your mind can't be shaken up. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is unshakable. So no matter what I see, no matter what I hear, I know with 100% certainty Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? Sometimes if you go to the U.S., you might see some big man with a red suit and a gray beard, You know that's not Santa Claus. That's just somebody dressed up as Santa Claus, but not the kids, right? The kids think that's Santa Claus, right? So you can know when you have wisdom with no uncertainty that this is the truth. There is no such thing as Santa Claus, right? So that's what you need to get to with all these natural laws, that you have certainty. You have truth, that you know with 100% certainty what are the natural laws, and you can see it as clear as day. What are these natural laws? And now you're operating through those natural laws. That's what it means to get rid of your ignorance and cultivate wisdom, that you know with 100% certainty, right? I just give you the example of Santa Claus because with belief, your mind can easily be shaken up. And that's why the Buddha is not teaching you to believe him. You never see anywhere in his teachings where he says, just believe me. Just believe me, just believe me. Nope, he doesn't say that. He says, come, investigate my teachings. Come, examine them. See for yourself, right? Because if you investigate his teachings close enough, you'll see that they're true. And that's where you'll cultivate wisdom. And now you'll make decisions through that wisdom. And that's where your ignorance is eliminated. So this is the higher fetters. Any questions on any of these?
We just talking about like the doubt. I think not just like a belief, but you should have to investigation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm like question myself, see if because a lot of people around me they just believe
Mm-hmm.
like the Buddhism, and I still have a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not verified myself,
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes I'm have question about myself. Isn't my doubt really a right doubt, or it's like the doubt because I'm arrogant?
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of my recent question.
The doubt is because of the ignorance, that the mind lacks wisdom of what the true teachings are, and you just haven't taken the opportunity or had the opportunity to investigate the teachings close enough to be able to eliminate your doubt. So that's why I suggest that you harness that doubt, turn it into an inquisitive mind, investigate the teachings closely. And if you investigate them close enough and you have enough improvement, you'll get past your doubt. You'll be beyond doubt. You'll know with 100% certainty. You won't be enlightened yet, but you'll have seen enough progress in your life. You'll know like, these teachings are working for sure. And you haven't got to enlightenment yet, but you'll know that they're working. And now you'll be past your doubt. And now you'll just be dedicated to learning and growing and developing on the path. That's why by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, there's no regression backwards because you will have already eliminated your doubt. You would have eliminated personal existence view and wrong behavior and observances, but you will have eliminated your doubt and you won't become complacent to the point of regression. You will just keep making forward progress. That's why someone, by the time they get to the first stage, there's no regression of their mind, that it's essentially locked in on these teachings and it knows with 100% certainty these teachings are working. So yeah, you can have doubt and you will have doubt when you first come to the path. You can harness it and turn it into an inquisitive mind, but eventually you can get rid of it. And where the doubt is coming from is because it just lacks wisdom of what the teachings are, and it hasn't seen enough progress yet to be able to know with 100% certainty that these teachings are working.
Got it. Yeah. I have another question, but might a little bit off topic. Like, how do you see like the Jesus, the person? It's like he's also in path of the like the one of the stage of the enlightenment, or if he is like which state he is in.
So it's usually not wise to talk about other people, right? Because like if you're looking at another person and deciding what stage of enlightenment they are in, that's judging that other person. So you would like to just focus on your growth and your development. That's the best way to do it. Yeah. But Jesus was definitely awake to a certain degree, right? Because he was able to tap into these natural laws and explain them, but within his own way, his own culture, right? His own way of explaining them. Okay, so now, let's see. What is this? Oh, okay. This is the part where I usually go into it in a lot more detail. Okay, so normally what I do is I go through each of these fetters in a lot of detail, and I just did it from my memory. But what I actually have in here is I actually have all those details that I just explained to you through here. But you guys can see that if you look at the PDF on our website. Okay. So tomorrow, what I'm going to be sharing with you guys is I'm going to be sharing with you guys the next part of our course, which of course we're going to start out each morning with loving kindness meditation, but then I'm going to teach you how to acquire concentration and eliminate this distraction that is in the mind. So I'm going to teach you guys how to develop concentration and focus. I'm going to teach you what the ego is and how to eliminate it. So that's part of our class tomorrow. Then in the afternoon, I'm going to teach you the evolution of our consciousness from animal to human. So that'll be in the afternoon, because that helps you to understand what you need to shed as you're making your way to enlightenment, because essentially what you're doing is becoming a better and better human being. But you've got these animalistic instincts that are in there tugging and pulling you. So it's helpful to be able to understand that. So that's what I'm going to be teaching you tomorrow. Okay. You have a question? Mm-hmm. For the big group? Yeah, they'll come in and join us. Mhm. Yeah, they'll come in and join us. Yeah, they'll come in and join us, and some of them will stick around because I'll have this talk here on this. So some of them will stick around for that, and some of them won't. Impermanence. Yeah. Yep, same thing. Yep. All right, guys. Yep. You have a question, Leo?
I often remove my body when I sit here. Like
I can't hear.
I do many different positions.
I still can't hear you because maybe we'll talk after class. Okay. All right. So you guys have a good evening, and we'll see you next time. Okay. Okay.